After analyzing the battles between Jason Lee Scott, Miguel Diaz, and then Billy Cranston versus Dimitri Alexopoulos, it's now time to analyze the fight between the two most creative fighters, Zack Taylor and Eli Hawk Moskowitz. With 2 points going to Team MMPR, let's see if Hawk will be the man to finally give Miyagi Fang a point. As usual, let's begin by introducing our fighters. Eli was born in 2002. Alongside Dimitri Alexopoulos, he would be known as one of the binary brothers at computer camp due to them both being great at coding. Eli, like Dimitri, was picked on and known for his cleft lip. He got surgery for it, which would leave a scar on his face that would hurt Eli's confidence. Eli would constantly be bullied by Kyler and Brooks and couldn't do anything about it. Eli would be friends with Miguel Diaz pretty quickly. Unlike Dimitri, Eli was actually pretty open to joining karate once Miguel joined and was able to beat Kyler in front of the whole school. Eli, alongside Dimitri, would actually join the dojo for a short time, but after Johnny continued to point out his scar, he would then leave and flip the script, becoming Hawk. Hawk would also gain confidence, strength, and get the girl of his dreams when he started to date Moon. Hawk would have some pretty rough patches once he started to become a bully during seasons 2 and 3. But through trials and loss of confidence, he would become the 2018 Miyagi-Do All-Valley champion. Through his best friends not giving up on him, he would be able to redeem himself and finally find balance in Miyagi-Do. Zachary Taylor was the first on-screen Black Ranger, known to be the second in command of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers team, taking charge when Jason couldn't. Zach was known for his dancing skills and easygoing attitude. He was born on May 3rd in Washington, D.C. On arrival day, he was chosen to use the Black Mastodon coin for his cleverness and bravery. He was well known because he created his own fighting style, which he called Hip Hop Kido. Zack would continue in his ranger duties after being the Mighty Morphin Black Ranger, when he was chosen to leave for a peace conference and became the Black Omega Ranger. Zack would have a small relationship with his fellow ranger Trini Kwan, but primarily he would chase after a girl named Angela, who would eventually become his girlfriend. In Boom Studios' comic, Zack would also date a girl named Violet Arias, a secret admirer of his who asked him out during Homecoming. Zack would return as a ranger much like his friends, aiding in the fight against Lord Draken, and currently is one of the only surviving rangers from Dark Spectre's attack during the Darkest Hour. Zack would also return later to stop Robo Rita, a revived version of Rita Repulsa who had taken over one of the Alpha's bodies. Zack would forever be known as the sensei of Hip Hop Kido and has cemented himself in Ranger history. So with the two most creative fighters summarized, let's begin round 3. Let's analyze who would win in a fight, but first we need some ground rules. We will be analyzing the characters in 5 points of criteria: strength, speed, tricks, IQ, and experience. Whoever has the edge over the other one in a single factor will gain a point, and in the end, the fighter with the most points wins the game. The Rangers cannot use their weapons or powers, and no Zords are allowed either. We will be analyzing the characters as a whole, so we will be pulling from all mainstream appearances of both the Miyagi Fangs and the Rangers. We will not be counting injuries. Things like Miguel's back injury will not be a factor, only used as a point in an analyzation, not as a factor against his abilities. I will do my best to analyze the Power Ranger fights only when they are unmorphed, and I will also try my best not to be biased to any one side. So with the rules set and fighters ready, let's begin round 3.
It's Morphin time!
No more Eli. It's time to uncage the heart.
To start this off, like always, we will begin with the strength analysis. Beginning with Hawk, we see that Hawk, like Miguel, trains just a little more than the usual students. Much like Miguel, Hawk is shown to be one of the best fighters in all 3 dojos. Hawk was one of the kids that Johnny put inside the cement mixer when they were first training during Season 2. Him, alongside Miguel and the others, were able to rotate it while in the cement. During the 2019 All-Valley tournament, we see Hawk showcasing his own strength. We see that Hawk is able to break almost all of the wooden boards, gaining points for Miyagi-Do. We also see that Hawk has enough strength to take on multiple opponents at once. Hawk has also shown he's able to take on people who are bigger than him, like when he was able to take down Brooks in a pretty brutal way. While this may not exactly summarize as strength, we see that Hawk was able to use his own strength against both Dimitri and Robbie by dislocating Robbie's shoulder in the first All-Valley tournament that we see in the show, and breaking Dimitri's arm. Like we said when discussing Dimitri, once Hawk switched sides in the house fight, he and Dimitri were basically able to clean sweep all the Cobras on their own. Hawk's strength is pretty great, as we do see over the course of Cobra Kai, he is in the Cobra Kai dojo the longest, so he would often be forced to build up strength more than he would defense. Hawk is one of the best and strongest fighters. Like Miguel and Dimitri, he was one of the 5 Miyagi-Fang fighters to stay within the circle to protect Anthony. We also see he was one of the main fighters to go against Chosen Taguchi while training to protect the egg. Zack at the beginning of the series was often seen training with Jason, often weight training and fight training with his best friends. Zack also builds up more strength due to his dancing history. He often is seen doing hip-hop dancing a lot throughout the series. In the 5th episode, we see Zack is actually pretty athletic, being able to do a handstand along with splits later on. Zack, much like the other Rangers, was able to build up more strength when fighting against the putties, again made of a clay rock-like substance. Zack, when also put on the ground, is seen being forced to flip himself away or toward a fight, even having to use dance moves such as the worm to escape certain opponents. Zack's legs were most likely his biggest strength since he used them so often. Zack was also shown to be able to take on fighters like the Z-Putties on his own. Zack has also gone against many other fighters unmorphed like the Snizzard or Minotaur. Zack's training would continue even further as he would become the Omega Black Ranger, where he would go on different planets fighting a bunch of different enemies, and even using some more futuristic tech to advance his training even further. In strength, Hawk and Zack are pretty well off. For these two, strength isn't their main factor, and that's pretty evident. But overall, I think I gotta give the point to Zack, since Zack is still fighting things that the normal human wouldn't fight, and still would overpower Hawk. So the strength point, probably gonna have to go to Zack. Now, while strength may not be Hawk or Zack's greatest ability, speed is a different story. Let's see if they can keep up with each other. Hawk is already shown to be a very quick fighter. He's constantly shown being one of the quickest Miyagi-Fang fighters. Arguably, he may not be stronger than Miguel, but he's definitely a bit faster. Hawk's speed allows him to react and counter a lot faster than the others. His speed also helps him in more flashy kicks. More speed usually means a faster snap and more power in a kick. We see that even Miguel has a harder time keeping up with Hawk, like when they fought in Coyote Creek. In the flagship dojo fight, Hawk is able to quickly tag in and out of the fight against Kyler with Dimitri. We see again, during the house fight, Hawk is quickly able to take out his opponents, whether he's fighting against Cobra Kai or with Dimitri. Once he and Dimitri teamed up, they were quickly able to overwhelm the Cobras, reacting to each other's techniques pretty quickly. Whether he was fighting with or against the Cobra Kais, him and Dimitri were able to quickly overwhelm all of the Cobras who were still fighting in the house fight. During the 2019 All Valley, we see that Hawk once again has to fight Kyler, but at this point he had lost his confidence. But once Hawk is able to regain his confidence, the fight doesn't even last 30 seconds. Hawk takes Kyler down to the ground 3-0 in less than 30 seconds, and the fight's over. Hawk's speed adds to his offense, and it even adds to his defense, being react in the water park. Hawk is able to block and deflect Kenny with ease, even with how fast Kenny was. Kenny's big factor is his speed, and if Hawk is able to react to him this quickly, and without even trying, he's able to basically outclass Kenny in speed. He outclasses Kenny again in speed during the qualifier match for the Sekai Taikai, even though he does technically lose his fight. But again, that was only because the story needed to progress, and Kenny had the ref on his side, and a cheating shot, it was unfair, we'll just say that. Zack is a very quick fighter. His dancing background only added to his already quick speed. We see Zack is able to use his hip-hop kido to fight the best he can. His speed allows him to get quick strikes in against all of his enemies. On the Island of Illusion, Zack is shown in one of his fastest fights against the Putty Patrollers. Zack's speed also allows him to team up with his friends pretty often. Usually, he's seen teaming up with Billy, and they're pretty much in sync throughout all their fights. Zack is also shown to use his speed to get in and out of a fight immediately. Zack's speed helps him when he's surprising his adversaries. Zack's speed is again shown in Rita's Seed of Evil, as he is seen rushing into a fight and outspeeding most of the Putty Patrollers that he has to face. And again, by the end of the Island of Illusion story arc, we see that Zack is in a dance contest, and again, he has a lot of speed when he's just chilling and dancing on his own. Although both characters are pretty quick, I think I'm giving this point to Hawk. Zack uses his speed mainly to recover and surprise his enemies, but Hawk is consistently using his speed in everything he does. He uses his speed as much as he can to react and attack. So the speed point goes to Hawk. Alright, if you notice that maybe the previous 2 segments went by a little faster, that's because I've been very interested to talk about these next 2 factors, and this is where the real fight is gonna happen. Tricks and IQ. Starting with tricks, let's start with Hawk. To get the usual stuff out of the way, Hawk of course has Miyagi moves such as the drum technique, wheel technique, kata, and the protect the egg technique. Hawk has also learned the Eagle Fang technique called the Screaming Eagle, and we've only seen 3 fighters use that technique. In Season 5, Episode 8, Hawk has his own fighting style, which he usually refers to as uncaging the hawk. Eli tends to use the air a lot in his fights. We see he's always able to keep himself moving. In addition, he has the chance to switch between fighting styles mid-fight. The way Hawk fights is that he'll usually start with either defense or offense, then switch to the other, and finally use a combination of both. In the All Valley, we see that Hawk begins the fight using Miyagi-Do tactics primarily. But once he realized that Robbie has him outclassed in that, Daniel reminds him he has offense as well. Hawk then switches to an Eagle Fang Cobra Kai way of fighting, surprising Robbie and allowing another point. Hawk then ends up using both techniques in the final fight. Again, when we see Hawk fight against Kenny, we see him use this strategy again, starting with Miyagi-Do going on defense, then going on offense when he hits Kenny in the leg. Hawk again shows that he utilizes his airtime to his advantage. In that same fight, he catches Kenny off guard by launching himself and kicking him, even though the ref didn't count the point. But Hawk's advantage of surprising his opponents is also his downfall. Looking at Hawk's track record, we know that Hawk has a record of being beaten by surprise. In Season 2, Hawk got beaten in the school fight against Dimitri. Since he underestimates him, he loses and gets kicked into the trophy case. The same thing happens when he goes against Kenny in the qualifier match. He was already told to go easy and didn't expect a cheap shot, so he underestimates Kenny and loses. Kyler also gets the jump on him, causing him to drop the tablet, leaving it to Anthony's defense in the flagship dojo fight. He also loses the fight in the tattoo parlor against Robbie and all the other Cobras. Yes, he was outnumbered in that fight, but when we look at the Cobras who were in that fight, Hawk should have been able to take most of them down, but he was again taken by surprise and outnumbered. Using this, we find out that Hawk has a weakness to surprise attacks, and that's where Zack might have an advantage. To get the things we can't exactly analyze out of the way, we know that Zack prefers much flashier kicks in the fights than practical kicks. Zack is also known to flip over and around his opposing fighter just like the other Rangers. Zack is probably the second best at this. The only person who usually does this more is Kimberly. Zack also tends to use his enemies on themselves using their momentum against them. Zack is shown to be able to do things like the flying tornado kick. Whether or not Zack is on the ground, he can excel. Zack is shown to be a high air fighter or a low ground fighter. If he's knocked on the ground, he's able to keep the fight going no matter what. But of course, the biggest factor here is that Zack has created his own fighting style, Hip Hop Kido. This is the main way Zack will fight, and he uses his dancing skills to confuse and disguise and throw off his own enemies. In the episode Day of the Dumpster, we see that Zack does this for the first time when he fights against the Putties. For a short time, the Putties have no idea what he's going to do next. Unlike the name suggests, Zack's fighting style isn't actually that similar to the fighting style of Hapkido. It's actually more similar to the fighting style Capoeira, which was a fighting style that was hidden inside of a dance. Zack constantly uses his dancing skills to disguise and make sure that no one can predict what his next move is going to be. Zack uses his dancing to make it impossible to guess what he's going to do next, and this will be his big factor. Zack's fighting style is so adaptive and unpredictable that Hawk won't know what to do or how to defend it. But even if Hawk goes on offense, Zack still uses his creative fighting style to protect and defend himself. So when it comes to tricks, Zack's going to have to take the win. Zack using his own martial art to defend himself and confuse his opponent is going to be Hawk's weakness. Hawk's fighting style might be similar, but it doesn't have the surprise factor to throw someone off like Zack. As we keep going, let's go to their IQ. To start, let's discuss their book smarts. When it comes to book smarts, Zack is actually a pretty smart guy. He's nowhere near his friend, Billy, or even Trini, but he's able to think quickly and get out of situations, like when he tricks Bulk and Skull so that he and the other Rangers can stop evil copies of themselves. So in book smarts, Zack may not be smarter, but what about creativity in fights? Like we already established, Zack created Hip Hop Kido, so we already know he's creative when it comes to how he fights. But what else can he do? Zack is a team player, allowing his teammates to aid him in the fight. Again, like we previously mentioned, he usually teams up with Billy, and we know that Zack is fairly confident in his abilities. Since we see he's usually leaving himself pretty open during the fights. In the episode Lions and Blizzards, Zack fights using the playground to his advantage, throwing down putties. We see more of this in the episode The Pig's Surprise, and even in the episode Beauty and the Beast. Zack is quickly able to see what he needs to do and find a quick way to do it. We also know that Zack uses his surroundings to his advantage as much as he can. He knows how to be crafty if he needs to. Not many people know this, but sometime before Rita went after Tommy Oliver, she offered the Green Ranger powers to Zack. Zack was the second in command, and Rita saw that he was able to come up with plans just like Jason. It was here that Zack tried to steal the Green Ranger coin before being transported back to Angel Grove. Zack was able to try and trick Rita Repulsa into trusting him before she quickly realized his plan and teleported him back. Now Hawk is a pretty clever guy when it comes to just book smarts. Hawk, of course, just like Dimitri, knows tech. According to Hayden Schlossenberg, Eli is the second smartest character in the show, just under his best friend Dimitri. Dimitri, Hawk, and Anthony are all the ones that are also able to figure out the key to the protect the egg strategy. In his Miyagi-Do training, he learns how to circle his opponent and figure out what they can do. Hawk uses his surroundings, but a bit more minimal when compared to some of the others. In the house fight, Hawk is shown to be using a glass jug against one of the Miyagi-Fang fighters named Mikey, knocking him out and continuing to taunt him. When the Cobra Kais ambush him in the tattoo parlor, Hawk is actually able to hold out for a bit using the table again to his advantage. In Coyote Creek, Hawk is again seen using the forest and trees to his advantage, bouncing off of them and catching Miguel off guard. He even launches Miguel's back into one. He's also a pretty great team fighter as well. When we go back to that house fight, once Hawk switches sides and is able to free Dimitri, we again notice they're able to take down all the Cobras while Miguel and Sam, the two best fighters, are being dealt with. In the flagship dojo fight, Hawk is able to keep the fight going with Kyler while also keeping the tablets safe at first. He's also able to help Dimitri in the fight while keeping the laptop safe. So if we're just doing smarts, then Eli easily takes this point. But Zack is probably a much more creative fighter, so both of them are going to get a point in this regard. We find ourselves again at the final factor, experience. Let's see how this plays out. When it comes to training, Miguel has only trained a little longer than Hawk. Hawk was one of Johnny Lawrence's first students. He has been training for about under 2 years at this point. Hawk is about 15 years old when he starts his training. Hawk is also trained in all 3 dojos. He started off in Cobra Kai from season 1 all the way to season 3, but after the house fight, he would then switch to Eagle Fang Karate for only a few episodes. But fairly quickly, after Eli's confidence is broken, he switched to his current dojo, Miyagi-Do Karate. First was Johnny Lawrence in Cobra Kai and Eagle Fang Karate. Then, once Johnny was taken out of Cobra Kai, John Kreese would take over and train him. Then, once he joined Miyagi-Do, he would be trained under Daniel LaRusso, and most recently in season 5, he would also be trained by Chosen Taguchi. Now, Zack was actually a lot harder to figure out than I thought he'd be. Unlike Jason, Billy, and Tommy, it never says what grade or belt he is throughout the show, but I think we might have to make a pretty good guess. At the beginning of the series, Zack is about 15 years old. Jason has seemingly been training him for a little while now. Besides Jason, one of the only people we've seen train Zack was Master Splinter in the Ninja Turtles crossover, once Donatello had to take his powers. Since Zack has been training for presumably a few years in the Juice Bar gym, but again, we don't ever really know how long. We can presume that Zack is most likely a black belt, much like the rest of his friends. But what we can say for sure is Zack is definitely a sensei in hip-hop Kido. Zack was trained by his best friend Jason Lee Scott. He started training with him a little while after they had met, so we can assume maybe about 2 to 3 years with training with Jason. So at the point that I was writing the script, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers 118 had not come out yet. Then I revised it once we found out some new information, thanks to issue 118 coming out. And I realized we actually finally do get a solid answer. In the issue, by the end, Zack is training with Trini and Jason. And here we finally get the answer. Zack is wearing a black belt. Although in some shots it does look purple. So finally with that, we do have a solidified answer on what grade belt Zack is. So we can assume with Zack being a black belt, he's been training in martial arts for quite a few years now. With this final piece of information, we can assume that Zack is probably the 3rd most experienced fighter in martial arts in the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, only being topped by Jason and Tommy. And with the final point dealt, I think that means Zack's gonna have to take the point for the Ranger team. We are at 3-0 for Miyagi-Fangs. At this point, there are only really 3 fights left. Although the Miyagi-Fangs can't technically win anymore, they can still try to tie it up. We'll see if that can happen in the next episode. But for now, Team MMPR takes another point.
Trini here, ready to rock!